Hello friends, welcome to Autumn at St. Andrew. It is my privilege to welcome you here today from the beautiful St. Andrew Sanctuary. I am grateful as always to share this sacred online space with you, where we are all invited, included, and valued as vital and beloved members of our broader worshiping community. St. Andrew is proud to be an open, affirming, inclusive congregation that welcomes all people into the full life and communion of our church. This includes saints and sinners, believers and skeptics, the lost and the found, the wanderers and the wanderers, families of all shapes and sizes, and people from every point along life's journey. No matter who you are or where you've been, no matter what you believe or even if you believe anything at all, you are welcome here and you belong here. If you have any questions about our church, prayer requests for our care team, or if you would like to get in touch with a member of our pastoral team or staff, please email info@gosaintandrew.com. If you would like to explore deeper engagement with the St. Andrew community through our many classes, group life gatherings, and service opportunities, you can email us directly at connect@gosaintandrew.com. We would love to hear from you. Just as a reminder, our full Sunday morning worship services, complete with music, prayer, announcements, liturgy, ministry spotlights, and the sermon, are live streamed on our YouTube page each week and permanently archived for viewing anytime. Lastly, to contribute a financial gift to the work and ministry of St. Andrew, you can always visit gosaintandrew.com/give or text St. Andrew to 28950. And now let's listen together to this week's scripture and sermon.
A reading from Joshua chapter 3. Early in the morning, Joshua rose and set out from Shittim with all the Israelites, and they came to the Jordan. They camped there before crossing over. Then Joshua said to the people, "Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." The Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that they may know that I will be with you as I was with Moses. You are the one who shall command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant. When you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." When the people set out from their tents to cross over the Jordan, the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant were in front of the people. Now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. So when those who bore the Ark had come to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the Ark were dipped in the edge of the water, the waters flowing from above stood still, rising up in a single heap far off at Adam, the city that is beside Zarethan, while those flowing toward the sea of the Arabah, the Dead Sea, were wholly cut off. Then the people crossed over opposite Jericho, while all Israel were crossing over on dry ground. The priests who bore the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan, until the entire nation finished crossing over the Jordan.
We are all going somewhere with our lives. Sometimes we're moving towards something, at other times we are running away from something, but to be human is to always be on the move. Even Madison Avenue capitalizes on this truth. Nissan once advertised its cars with that mantra, "Life is a journey, enjoy the ride." Mazda simply said, "Zoom, zoom, zoom." Do you remember when Microsoft launched that new version of Windows with the slogan, "Where do you want to go today?" And even now we hear Southwest Airlines, whenever we are in a mess and need a break, it says, "You want to get away?" We're all going somewhere. We always have been as humans. The Bible captures beautifully and sometimes painfully this universal journey we all seem to be on. The Bible is really just about people on the move, trying to make their way home. When we read the Bible, we hear over and over again these three overarching themes. Life is a journey. The ache that fuels our journey is the longing for home. And the hope that sustains our journey is to arrive before we depart. These three simple truths describe our universal human experience. We are all on a journey from there to here, from here to there, searching for home. But home is not necessarily an actual house or a specific place or even a general location on a map. The kind of home we all long for is the real felt experience of being completely known and accepted and loved and safe and at peace with ourselves and with others and with our surroundings, wherever we happen to be. That's the kind of home we all long for, isn't it? But that home, we know, can be so elusive and hard to find that we can spend our whole lives searching for it, never quite sure if we'll ever get there, or whether we can stay for very long if we do get there. And so we live chronically with this palpable sense of homesickness, this ache of feeling far from home and restless and never quite at peace. So we keep searching, fueled by this ache and driven by this hope that someday we'll find home before our journey is over. And isn't this the meaning of life? To arrive before we depart. Have you ever asked yourself along your journey, am I home now? Or is the road I'm taking leading to the kind of home I long for? Or how will I know if or even when I've arrived? Our story from Joshua is precisely about this ache and hope that brings the Israelites to the threshold of their true home, the Promised Land. And it's about their daring decision that they have to make in order to cross it. For decades, the Israelites were fueled by this homesickness. They were driven by this hope of finally arriving home, mostly because they'd never even been home before. In Egypt, living as captive slaves, they couldn't fathom what it might be like to ever be free and to be safe and to be seen and to be at peace. They were homesick for a home they couldn't even imagine. But then Moses liberates them from Egypt. He leads them to freedom through the Red Sea. He brings them into the wilderness, all while holding out to them this hope of one day arriving at a home flowing with milk and honey, and peace and safety and prosperity. The journey was long and painful. They'd been on the road for 40 years, enduring countless ups and downs, moral victories and miserable failures, surprising breakthroughs and serious setbacks. Nobody was sure they'd ever make it home at all. In fact, many had departed before they even had a chance to arrive, dying in the desert from homesickness and hopelessness. And just when it seemed that Moses would finally lead them into the Promised Land, he died. It's one of the most heartbreaking details of the Israelites' 40-year saga. Not even Moses gets to arrive home before he departs from this world. He leads them all this way, through all these hardships, over all these years. But not even Moses makes it home. When we meet up with the Israelites in today's passage, it's just days after Moses' death. Joshua has now been installed as their new leader. He's standing before the people on the shores of the Jordan River, announcing that the day of their homecoming has finally arrived. All that stands in their way from entering the Promised Land is a big, impassable river. In the story, the Jordan is made out to be a major obstacle. It's spring, we're told. There's flooding. The banks are overflowing. The river is swollen. It's apparently going to take a divine miracle to get the people across the Jordan, just like it took a miracle to get them through the Red Sea 40 years earlier. But have you ever actually been to the Jordan River? Maybe the geography has changed over the years, I don't know, but let's just say it's not exactly the raging waters of the Colorado tumbling down the Rocky Mountains during snowmelt. I don't want to steal the Bible's thunder here, but if it really took a miracle to get those people across the mostly shallow and placid Jordan River, maybe that explains a lot why it took them 40 years to complete what should have been like a 10-day journey through the wilderness to begin with. So if you're skeptical about these miraculous details in the story, maybe it helps to remember that the miracle is not actually the point. There are many powerful stories in the Bible about what God does for people. But this story is about what the people do in response to God. The real miracle here is not that God somehow holds back the waters while the people cross the river. The real miracle is that the people actually left the familiar banks of the only world they'd known for 40 years to cross over into an unknown world fraught with danger and uncertainty and no guarantees. Yes, God had promised them that this land would be their home, but did you hear the one important detail in this story that would make anyone question whether crossing into Canaan was actually a good idea? That detail is that it turns out there are already a lot of people living there, like 7 tribes who are super unlikely to just roll out the red carpet and throw their new Israelite neighbors a homecoming party. On the other side of the river are Canaanites and Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. Now we might wonder, what will become of them? According to the story, God will drive all of them out of the land. There's a lot about this part of the story that makes the whole river crossing problematic on so many levels, especially considering the bloodshed that has taken place in that same land over the last 75 years and in particular over the last 7 days. Most of us might struggle with the injustice of this tragic assumption that nations and peoples and ethnicities must be displaced or destroyed so that others could finally be at home in this world. The belief that God actually sanctions such violence has served as theological justification for so many atrocities, like the Crusades, the eradication of indigenous people, the transatlantic slave trade, the Holocaust, apartheid, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and the deaths of innocent Israelis and Palestinians just this past week. We can't overlook this problematic detail that once the Israelites crossed the Jordan, it didn't go very well for the Canaanites or the Hittites or any of those peoples who already occupied the land. A lot of harm and bloodshed ensued that in the modern world must never be condoned. But this story appears in our Bible not to justify colonization or the forceful seizure of land or religious nationalism, or even to propose political strategies for nation building. This is a story about the universal spiritual journey of crossing over. The Jordan River has always been a symbol for the so-called borders in our lives that keep us stuck in the old world, the wilderness, preventing us from finding our true home, the promised land. The Jordan River crossing is an enduring paradigm for the brave journey we all must make if we are ever to find our true home in this world. It's a freedom story, which is why the Jordan River featured so prominently in the African American spirituals of the 19th century. For enslaved people, crossing Jordan meant dying to the slave identity and being reborn as a free person in the new world. It was a bold act of political resistance. And so they sang, "Wade in the water, wade in the water, children. Wade in the water, God's gonna trouble the water." Crossing Jordan for them meant going home to restore a community lost in oppression and slavery. And so they sang, I'm going down to the river of Jordan. I'm going to sit at the welcome table. I'm going to feast off milk and honey. So the river crossing story here calls all of us to imagine our own borders and barriers and obstacles that keep us stuck in the old world, in old ways, that prevent us from being truly at home in the world. It asks what's holding us back and what's keeping us from experiencing freedom. And what do we need to let go of? What river must we cross to make our way home? If you find yourself at the river's edge, homesick and longing for home, this story offers two simple clues about how and where to find the courage to wade in the water and cross over. The first is to refuse to look back or turn back. For the Israelites, Moses had been their leader for 40 years. He was their answer to every question, their solution to every problem. He meant everything to them. And now he was dead. Not only was Moses buried before the people crossed the Jordan, but his burial place was never disclosed. Moses was buried somewhere, it says, in the land of Moab. But to this day, no one knows for sure where. It seems almost cruel and thankless to bury him in such a matter. Why didn't they take his body with them and bury him in the promised land? Didn't he earn that much? Why didn't they at least mark his grave so people could go back and honor him? God, it seems, commands the people to bury Moses in the old world and to leave no gravestone. Why? Because the human longing for what used to be can be so much more powerful than our longing for what could or might be. To be human is to long for the good old days. And the word for that longing is nostalgia. It's a word that comes from the Greek root nostos, which means to return home, as in to go back to where you're from or to where you began. Nostalgia is the sentimental pining or the wistful affection for the past. And we often take great comfort in looking back and remembering the good times, the people we've lost, past accomplishments, formative events in our lives, unforgettable memories. But what makes nostalgia so dangerous and paralyzing is that it often turns the past into something much bigger and more wonderful and more desirable than it actually even was. Or sometimes it turns it into something better than what we think might yet be. Nostalgia can be like a drug that numbs us to the challenges and risks of our present reality and this divine call to move on. It never satisfies the longing for home. There's nothing wrong with remembering the good times, but in God's calculus, it's never faithful to go back and try to relive them. God's call is always to cross the rivers before us, not behind us. Moses had helped the people make this temporary home in the wilderness for a time, but it was never a home that would satisfy their deepest longings. They had to leave him behind to move forward. And so the story asks us, is something from our past keeping us stuck in the old world, in our old ways, preventing us from finding home? But there's a second clue here about how and where to find the courage to wade in the water and cross, and that is simply to pursue the presence of God. In the story, the people are commanded to let the Ark of the Covenant go before them. The Ark is the symbol of God's presence among them. The ark contains the law, that is the covenant between God and the people that God has made. It's the holiest object on earth to them. It's a reminder that God is with them. Joshua tells the people that all they have to do is pursue the ark that goes before them, to follow it, and they'll make it across the river. It's tempting for us to want to assign some magical power to that ark, to see it as some kind of lucky charm or some superstitious rabbit's foot to get them through hard times. But the ark is simply a symbol for how God is always out in front of us, leading us, calling us, wooing us forward. If you've ever thought, man, it would be nice, really nice, to see God's presence in the world, like the Israelites could see that ark, if that's you, take a closer look at this story. In the story, the people are commanded to follow the ark from a distance of 2,000 cubits. That's 3,000 feet. Unless they had binoculars, they didn't actually see anything. This wasn't a walk-by-sight experience. It was all trust. Whenever we face rivers in our lives and wonder how we're ever going to get across them, I think we often want to know what's the right way to go and what's the right step to take here. And we tend to think there is always only one right way or only one right step, and that we better get it right or else. But what the Bible says here and what it says over and over again is this: there is almost always more than one right way to go and more than one right step to take. Rarely does God ever put before us binary choices. Sometimes there are better ways to go than others. Sometimes we'll take a less direct route than advisable. And sometimes the route we choose will take longer or become more painful. But in faith, as in life, there is almost always more than one way to find our way home. All we have to do is take one step and then look and listen and take another and look and listen. And with every step, God looks and listens too. All we have to do is choose a way and take one step. And God reveals to us the next best possibilities for us. And then we choose again. This is how we wade in the waters and cross the rivers of our lives. We refuse to look back or turn back or walk back into the wilderness. And we choose a way forward, taking one step at a time. And we discover, eventually, that we can make the whole journey that way. Our takeaways for today: the meaning of life is to arrive before we depart. God's call is always to cross the rivers before us, not behind us. There is almost always more than one right way to go and one right step to take.